What I've been interested for quite some time is to which extent issues of the environment or global environmental change can become a trigger or an intensifier of existing conflict or lead to new conflicts. For example, to which extent climate change may be able to trigger conflicts, or to which extent it may force people to move elsewhere, depending where they are, from a rural area if they are affected by drought to urban areas or to other countries. Now, I think what we have seen since the end of the Cold War, we have seen a total rethinking of security. First, we have seen a widening of security, looking from the narrow political military security that prevailed during the Cold War, also to environmental issues. Now, this debate on environmental security we can distinguish. During the 1990, scholars focused primarily on environmental scarcity and environmental degradation of water and soil, to which extent this scarcity resulted in overuse, and that way resulted in environmental stress, and environmental stress becoming an additional trigger of conflicts or an intensifier of existing conflicts. So this is with regard to climate change. This debate started much later with regard to security since 2002, 2004. Now, with regard to climate change and security, I think there are three debates to be distinguished. The first debate that was triggered in the UK and the European Union looked at climate change and the impacts on international security. The interest, I think, both of the UK and of Germany and other EU countries was how to address these possible linkages and to work in a proactive way to avoid that climate change related factors like increase of temperature, precipitation, a decline in sensitive areas, or sea level rise, or extreme weather events lead to conflict. Now, the second debate is with regard to climate change causing impacts for national security. This is the debate primarily in the United States that has developed since 2007 and was then picked up by the government and especially by the military and the intelligence services, who look into the eventualities, the impact these changes around the world may have for U.S. national security, especially for the operation of the U.S. armed forces globally. Now, the third debate, or the third discourse, is about climate change and human security. Now, this brings us then, what is human security about? Who introduced it? And so the concept of human security was very much influenced by scholars from South Asia. As scholars and practitioners, it was the former finance minister of Pakistan, Mahbub ul Haq, when he was in charge of the UNDP, United Nations Development Programme, report on human development. He coined in 1994 the concept of human security as a functional equivalent to human development. And then, with the support of the Japanese government, the Commission on Human Security was set up at the UN by Kofi Annan in 1999. And Mrs. Ogata and Nobel laureate Amartya Sen from India, from Bengal in India, and he and Mrs. Ogata, they argued that human security should address both issues of protection and empowerment. Now, they did not discuss climate change. They did not specifically discuss environmental issues. They looked at human security at two main pillars. Freedom from want, they addressed the development agenda, and freedom from fear, the humanitarian agenda, to protect people, to protect women in wars. Now, Kofi Annan added a third pillar, freedom to live in dignity, where he looked on human rights and good governance. And a colleague of mine, Professor Bogardi, and myself, we added a fourth pillar of human security, freedom from hazard impact. Now, this links it up with the environmental agenda and the disaster agenda, and also to the effects of global environmental change, especially weather-related and climate-related natural hazards like drought, floods, and storms. So that's why we argue we want to address issues of global environmental change, and especially climate change, from the perspective of human security. Now, this debate has then been taken up by the Human Security Network, which is a loose coalition of countries. From Asia, I think there is only Thailand and Jordan who are members of the Human Security Network. Now, we have different, climate-related, not climate-related. The traditional discussion was to which extent the scarcity of water and soil, especially in the rural area, where people cannot sustain their livelihood anymore. They have to look elsewhere. And especially the young people, very often they leave to the urban cities, hoping to support their families back home. With regard to climate change, we look at longer-term changes. We don't look at weather, we look at climate. That means change of weather patterns over a longer time period, so that they lead to fundamental or significant changes. Now, some of the changes are tropical storms. Now, tropical storms, as you know, have been with us for a long time. But the tropical storms have become more, we have more of them, and become more intensive, and they hit regions that were not so hit so much before, as we have seen just a week prior to the US presidential election, the touchdown of the hurricane Sandy in New Jersey and New York. This was relatively new, that these tropical storms touch down so far in the north. Usually they touch down in the Caribbean and in Mexico, Central America, in the Caribbean islands, and in the southern states of the United States. But with regard to forcing people, now we may have temporary displacement. So after a storm, people flee if they can flee, but once things are over, they try to get back. Now, more fundamental is the projection of sea level rise. Now, this will be over a longer period, and but the impact will be much more severe. So the people can adjust. It will not be from one day to the next or within a couple of hours. So they have the possibility to adjust, but the projection are, depending on how high the greenhouse gas concentration will be in the atmosphere by end of this century, we may have, depending on the assessments of scientists, between maybe 40 centimeters up to 2 meters increase of sea level. Now, this will force possibly millions of people, depending how high it gets, to leave So they will be forced to move. Yeah, and the countries that will be most affected are small island states like Maldives with an altitude maybe of 1 or 2 meters. Those islands may totally disappear. And this raises the question, where are these people going? Now, so far, the legal instruments we have, the Refugee Convention, you only have a right for asylum for political reasons, political persecution, and on, or as a representative of minority people, you have a right to get asylum if these conditions are fulfilled. So far, there is no entitlement for environmental reasons. Yeah, and so, but there is a huge debate among scholars, less among governments, to some extent also already the international organizations, like the International Organization on Migration and the United Nations High Commissioner on Refugee. They have started to which extent climate change implications may lead to an entitlement. Yeah? But this so far is not acceptable. Only very few countries, I think New Zealand is one of the countries that is thinking about to grant the right of settlement to people from the small Pacific islands if their islands should disappear due to rise of sea level.